Good day everyone, especially to those watching this video presentation. Once again, a pleasant day to all of you. This is Miss Hannah Tristadi Cabos, and I will going to discuss today all about the communication models, which is actually the continuation already since the previous reporter, Miss Angel Ruque, already did the introduction when it comes to the communication model. And right now, I am going to discuss to you the rest of the communication models. Before we dive to the communication models, let's have first an overview of what is a communication model. So basically, model is a representation of reality. Thus, communication model depicts how author conceives or explain a communication. It clearly emphasizes the relationship of the different elements within the process of communication. So most models try to describe both verbal and nonverbal communication and often understand it as an exchange of messages or ideas. Their functions basically is to give a compact overview of the complex process of a communication. So there is a lot of communication process, which of course these processes are called models, and we have different kinds of model of communication that I will be discussing for you for today. So at this point in time, we have three models of communication. The previous reporter, as I've mentioned, already discussed the unilinear model. Right now, I am going to highlight the remaining two, which is the transactional model and the system model. So let's start with the transactional model. What is a transactional model? So transactional model is a second generic type of communication model that is two-way, cyclical, and processual nature of communication. It actually acknowledges the different messages that can be interpreted differently depending on the background, the experience, the culture, and the context of the individual receiving them. So in simple terms, the transactional model of communication is a two-way process in which both the sender and the receiver are actively participating, involved in constructing and interpreting the meaning or the message. We have an example for model of we have an example for transactional model. We have classic examples. First, we have Osgood's model in the year 1971. So Osgood-Schramm's model of communication is known as a circular model because it indicates that messages can go into two directions. Hence, once a person decodes a message, then they can encode it and send a message back to the sender. They could continue encoding and decoding it into a continuous cycle. So Osgood model describes communication as a dynamic process whereby events begins with receiving stimuli. It starts with a stimuli. So each participant in a communication sends and receives messages. In Osgood's model, there is true interpersonal communication since it is a communication from one person to another. So it became dynamic. Dynamic meaning to say it changes as time goes by because there is an interactive relationship between the source and the receiver. So as you can see here, this is the illustration of Osgood's model. So we have here on the upper side the message, and same with on the lower side. We have also on the left side the encoder, interpreter, decoder, and on the right side we also have decoder, interpreter, and the encoder. So basically, as we explain this process, as you can see, the interaction starts. A message will then be delivered by an encoder and will be interpreted by the decoder and vice versa. So in this model, communication is not linear, but it is circular. Communication is reciprocal and equal because they interact from one another. There is no dominant element within the process. And messages are based on interpretation, because with interpretation, that is the understanding. It serves as where the receiver understand the message, and communication involves encoding, decoding, and of course interpreting. And the very important thing is the message. There will be no such thing as process in the communication model if there is no message or an idea. Let's go to the next model of transactional. We have Kincaid's convergence model in the year 1981. So the Kincaid's convergence model was invented in the year 1981 by D. Lawrence Kincaid. This model is a nonlinear model of communication wherein two communicators strive to reach mutual understanding. So as you can see here, this is the process of Kincaid's model. We have the model in figure 1, or the participant A, and we have the participant B. So the model in figure 1 is cyclical and represents the communication as the process, dynamic and ongoing, so that each tiny interaction affects the whole process. In the process, the approach to communication, there is no single beginning and no single end to an interaction. Both parties are engaged in sending and receiving messages simultaneously. So same with Osgood's model. Here in Kincaid's model, it says that this model has no beginning and no end, meaning to say it is continuous, and the ultimate goal of this model is to achieve a mutual understanding. So as you can see, it is just it shows a spiral. Um, it shows a spiral line in there, which means that the message, the interaction is continuous. There is no beginning and no end. So basically, the participant A and the participant B gives messages from one another, and if ever they achieve the mutual understanding that they wanted to achieve on the process, then it is called the Kincaid's model of communication. To proceed with, we have the another model. We already previously discussed the um, second model. We have the transactional model, which has two classical examples. We have the Osgood's model of communication and the Kincaid's model of communication. And now we are down to the third, the last one, which is the systems model. So of course, we need to define what is a systems model. So a systems model of communication adheres to the principles of general system theory, in which it explains phenomena as a whole, made up of interacting, interdependent, and interrelated parts working together towards one goal or set of goals of the system. Which means, compared with the unilinear model that emphasizes the dominance of a certain element. So here in systems model, all the elements plays a very important role in the effective communication as a whole. So meaning to say, all the elements involved in the process of the model is interdependent or dependent from one another, so that they can provide an effective communication as a whole. So let's have, of course, the example here in the systems model. We have the model of the Koino-Star model. So Koino-Star model was it was proposed by Rogelio V. Koino. It is actually derived from the David Berlos model of communication. So here, before we start with the meaning of that, let's have the first overview, who is Mr. Koino. So Mr. Rogelio V. Koino is who became the dean of the UPLB College of Economics and the first chancellor of UP Mindanao. He proposed the systems communication model, which is a star-shaped variation of Berlos model, establishing the correlation between and among the five elements of communication. So let's have first the elaboration of Berlow's model of communication, Mr. since Coinestar model of communication is derived from David Berlow's model, but the difference is the model is in like a shape of a star. So basically, when you say the Berlow's model of communication, it takes into an account the emotional aspect of the message. It underscores the importance of tailoring communication to meet the needs and expectations of the audience.